Alrighty, welcome back to First and Short, your first place to get short bits of college football analysis. My name is Aaron,
My name is Mashfik.
and today we've got a full agenda. With the season kicking off back this weekend, we're going to preview some of Week Zero. We're going to highlight some of the things we think are the best of this weekend. We're going to cover Big 12 championship odds and our thoughts on that. We're going to provide our picks for the national champions. And we're also going to talk about some of the coaches that are in the hot seats this year. We got some news around strength of schedule today and how that'll factor into moving forward in the college football playoff. So first things first, week zero preview.
Absolutely. Yep. Appreciate that, Aaron. Yeah, we've got week zero is starting up this weekend. It's not the best slate of games in the world, but listen, I'll take it after this off season. We've got a 12 o'clock game. Iowa State it's called Iowa State at Kansas State, but they're playing in Dublin, Ireland, so they both have a kind of a visitor disadvantage there. We've got Idaho State at UNLV. We've got Fresno State at Kansas, Sam Houston at Western Kentucky, and then Stanford at Hawaii. The one game Aaron, that I wanted to highlight here is Iowa State at Kansas State. As I was doing more research into this game, I didn't know that this is actually one of the longest running rivalries in college football. It has a moniker, Farmageddon, which makes sense. There's a lot of farms, as I would imagine, in Iowa and Kansas.
Mhm.
But Aaron, did you know that? So while this is one of the longest running, do you know which one? Do you know what is the longest continuous rivalry in college football?
No, I don't know.
Or
If I had to
you want
take
to
a
take a
wild,
guess? Do you want to take a guess?
yeah, if I had to take a wild guess, it might have to be, maybe a Southern school or an Ivy League school.
Mm, true. Well,
That's
the
just
Ivy
my
Leagues
guess.
aren't in FB. I don't know if I was only looking for FBS, but the SEC, there's some SEC ones up there. Obviously, the Deep South's oldest rivalry, Georgia and Auburn, and
Mhm.
then there's another one, UNC and Virginia. I think that one is called the South's oldest rivalry, but there's actually an older one. We will cover that near the end of this episode, so don't touch that dial. But yes, like I said, this game will be played Iowa State at Kansas State, Farmageddon 2025. It's going to be played in Dublin, Ireland. I'm not a big fan of college football being played, this kind of new trend of being played in different countries. Neutral site games are already bad enough. Now fans are being asked to get visas to go watch their alma mater play on Saturdays. I think that takes away from the tradition of what college football means. If you want to go visit Ireland and watch the game on TV, but the game should be played at one of these schools' campuses. I think one of the things to look out for in this game is Avery Johnson. He's the quarterback for Kansas State. He is basically the offense for the Wildcats. In my, doing my research on him, I didn't realize that last year he set the Kansas State school record with 25 touchdown passes. Obviously, and he did that as a freshman.
Mhm.
But as you might expect from a first year, consistency was an issue for him. He threw multiple interceptions in three of Kansas State's four losses last year. Personally, I think they're better on both sides of the ball than Iowa State, which would make sense. They are the co-favorites to win the Big 12. So I think this should be a win for Kansas State. I think they'll win this game. I think they'll win most of their games. And start. I am sure that it's on their mind to start the season off with a conference win. They're very determined to do so, and I think they'll bring their A game to across the ocean, I guess.
Sure, sure. Yeah. So you mentioned, K-State, they're a co-favorite to win the conference this year. I think that's a pretty good segue to get into, some of the details of this list of odds and people who are favored to win the Big 12 championship. So I'm seeing right now at the top of the list with, that favorite with K-State, you have Arizona State.
Yep.
It's pretty obvious, they were a team that made the CFP playoffs last year. They got Sam Levitt back at quarterback. He's the face of the program, right? He had a record-setting year last year. He had over 2,800 yards, 24 touchdowns. Things that are not going to be easy to do. Replacing Cam Scatterboo.
Hmm.
Um, I'm excited to see him play in the NFL for the Giants this year, but
Yeah.
that's a big piece of the offense that they're going to have to replace. Um, Kenny Dillingham, he's a young coach, but he's up and coming. He's going to have this team ready to fight all year long. I'm excited to see what happens.
What is it about the Big 12? Arizona State and Kansas State, they both have now sophomore quarterbacks, but as freshmen, they're just setting records all over the place. What is it about the Big 12 that allows uh, rookie quarterbacks to, or not rookie, but freshman quarterbacks to do that? We don't have to get into that at this point, but that's just interesting interesting point that I noticed. The third highest Big 12 in terms of conference or championship odds is Texas Tech. And if you guys watched the last episode, they are my dark horse team of this year. I think they're going to be a team that kind of like sprung on the scene like Indiana did last year or Florida State did the year before. And obviously Vegas agrees. They are going to make some moves this year. So I just wanted to point out that Texas Tech is also number 3 on that Big 12 championship odds list.
Mhm. That's a good one. That's a good one. I'm looking down the list now, and so in that mid to lower tier, you see Colorado. They're not one of the favorites this year. They're kind of middle to lower tier.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, you lost a lot of talent on offense. You lost Shador, you lost Travis Hunter, you lost some really, really great receivers, but I don't know why they're counting them out that low. Uh, you got, the freshman coming in, Juju Lewis, and then you also have the transfer from Liberty at quarterback coming in, Caden Salter. He's no slouch. He was an excellent dual threat quarterback last year at Liberty. He had 2,400 passing yards, 27 passing touchdowns, and 845 rushing yards. You know the Big 12 is wide open, and they're one of those teams. I think Deion Sanders isn't going to let this team just slack down like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's funny that Colorado is where it is on the list, and BYU is right above it. They also have a true. They just named just today, Bachmeyer, excuse me, Bear Bachmeyer as their starting quarterback, and he's going to be a true freshman. As we all heard earlier this year, the quarterback that they had before, the news slipped that he was fornicating on campus, and so BYU said, "Nah, you gotta go." So, Bear, if you're listening, don't do it. If you want to
Yeah.
keep the job, don't do it.
And
Who else?
then
Who else do
that
we have on this list?
next on the list, if you keep on going down at the very, very bottom, you got UCF because Gus Malzahn just left the program to join FSU. He's the new offensive coordinator at FSU. Even though they are at the bottom of the list, the Big 12 always feels like it's more than wide open for anybody in the conference to take it all. So yeah, it's definitely wide open. Speaking of that, who do you think is your favorite to win the conference?
I I'm gonna keep banging this Texas Tech drum. They had a huge transfer portal overhaul. They had one of the best classes, transfer portal classes. And not only that, they tackled the key issues that they had last year with this transfer portal class, which was mostly on defense for them. They have a new defensive coordinator. Not to say he's a world beater or anything like that, but maybe he'll come here and make a name for himself. And they have a returning quarterback. Seems like that's a recurring theme here in the Big 12, but not necessarily across the wider league. So, yeah, I think Texas Tech is. I mean, they're in the top 3. I think that's a very reasonable choice to make for your Big 12 champion.
Okay,
What about you?
that's a fair take. For me, it's gonna have to be Arizona State. So, I know they lost, Scadaboo, but they're bringing back 79% of their 2024 production. And then again, Sam Levitt, he's going to be the face. He's going to be probably the quarterback most comfortable, in my opinion, in the league,
Yeah,
with in terms of experience. He played on a very, very high level last year, and he performed against the Texas Longhorns really, really well.
yeah, that was a great
Um,
game.
A very, very great game. And then another thing to consider, they have a pretty favorable schedule. So, of course you're playing Big 12 play, but you're avoiding those teams like BYU, like K-State,
Mm-hmm.
K-State in the regular season. So, that's my favorite, and I think they have a really, really good chance of winning and maybe even returning back to the college football playoffs.
Awesome. So that covers the Big 12. We're not going to cover every conference in detail like that today, but I do want to zoom out a bit and talk about the national landscape. I want to talk about our national title winners, our picks, at least for winners, Aaron. I'll let you know right now. I went to Vegas earlier this year. I'm not a big gambler or anything like that, but I put some money down. I sprinkled it across a few teams. I did this last year. I put money on only on two teams, Ohio State and UGA. In a different universe, they almost could have played each other if certain things went a different way. They could have played each other in the Natty game, but I made some money on Ohio State last year. Didn't feel as comfortable with them with Ohio State this year. I think they've got a lot of different things changing, and that's just tough to overcome. But this year, I put my money on Oregon, Texas, and Georgia. Do want to provide some additional context there. With Oregon, I'm not too confident on that pick anymore. I think with Evan Stewart being hurt earlier this year, it's just tough. He's obviously one of their best players, their best wide receiver, starting wide receiver. With their new quarterback, Dante Moore, coming in without a main weapon at wide receiver being gone, that's going to be really tough for them to overcome. But I do think their schedule is still very reasonable. They do go to Penn State, and the Nittany Lions finally get a good night game, a good whiteout night game. So I think that'll be a fun watch. But I think Oregon's schedule is still very reasonable, but just with who's hurt on the team, just kind of tough for them. So that leaves Texas and Georgia for me, and obviously Texas and Georgia are what they are. Texas has a much harder schedule this year. They have to go to Columbus to start the year. We've talked about that. They have to go to Athens, and they have to go to Gainesville. I think that's going to be a very sneaky, tough game in the SEC for Texas when they go play
Mm.
Florida. So with that being said, I have a biased answer and I have a non-biased answer. I'll let you guess what the biased answer is. My non-biased answer is still Georgia. And I think if I have to give like objective results or objective viewpoints here, they do have a hard schedule, but all the hard games are at home. Last year, all of those were on the road. The schedule is much more forgiving than it was last year. They have, let's just call it what it is, a few more cupcakes on the schedule this year than they did last year. They
Mhm.
don't have big issues with injuries at this point in fall camp like they did last year. Their wide receiver room is probably the most revamped room in all of college football. And I would say that their linebacker room is probably the best room in all of America, maybe second to Ohio State's wide receivers, but elite nonetheless.
Mhm.
Looking at those points, I think that it's a very realist. It doesn't have to be a biased answer to say Georgia is my top pick for the national title. What about you?
Absolutely. So I'm gonna, go ahead and throw my biased answer out there. I'm with the dogs. They're my favorite just because, like you mentioned, their schedule's a little bit more favorable this year.
Yeah.
They really did some work in the transfer portal to attack, the public so-called weaknesses. We saw drop passes last year. We saw not enough passing production. And so them getting those big time receivers and, one or two incoming freshmen, I think that there's no excuse. I think it's time to produce, time to bring another ring back home.
Yeah.
So, that's my first choice. Now my second choice, if Georgia's, for whatever reason does not win a national
Sure.
championship this year, I'm gonna have to go with the Penn State Nittany Lions.
Hmm.
Um, they're a team that's bringing back quarterback Drew Aller. He's gonna lead a revamped offense. And he's supported by some really, really good running backs. He's got,
Yep.
Nick Singleton and Ketron Allen. Um, they've upgraded their wide receiver room as well. So
Hmm.
they've gone in the transfer portal as well. James Franklin, I think he's this close, man. He made the college football playoffs semifinals last year,
Hmm.
and he's one of those coaches that hasn't really, had a level of stagnation or
Yeah.
decline, right?
Yeah.
Um, Their schedule, it's a little bit more favorable than last year. They have Oregon at home and Ohio State away. Those are the two major games that could be
No,
losses,
no,
but
No Michigan, no. I guess USC. Like, yeah, it's
yeah,
it's
I
a couple
mean,
of hard games in the Big Ten, but very favorable conditions, I think.
very favorable. And then, they have Indiana, which could be an uh-oh, but I I think they're very, favorable and probable of winning at least 10 games.
Well, according to Coach Signetti, Indiana is basically the SEC team of the Big Ten, so we all know how tough that game's going to be. Um, Sounds good. So, I mean, that's our national title picks. These are some of the. I mean, we talked about 4 or 5 teams here. They're the cream of the crop. These are the best teams in America. But what about some of the worst teams in America? Not necessarily the worst teams, but the worst positions that their coaches are in. We want to cover a few of the hottest coaching seats that coaches are sitting on at this moment. We came together, we debated, we came up with three. Aaron and I, we're gonna go. We're gonna go 3, 2, 1. One being the hottest. I'm gonna cover 3 and 2. And the way we kind of measured this, we had an internal kind of analysis. What is the expectation of the fan base for this particular team? What is the expectation for this coach? What kind of brand does this coach bring? Did they come from other big programs? Did they have success at other programs, and now are they at a program that success should have, migrated with them? What is the amount of talent on that team? How have they been performing as they've been a coach for this team? These are the type of things that kind of went into our analysis. Number 3 on this list, I don't think this is a surprise, but it's Mike Norvell at Florida State. In my opinion, it's kind of a little bit bad timing on his part. I think he peaked a little too early. He had a year or two of kind of mediocre results, and then one year that transfer portal just hit. They had a great quarterback who unfortunately got hurt late in the season. They had great talent all around offense and defense. But then when key players got hurt and then, they got snuffed from the playoffs, and then that team probably just kind of mentally gave up. They played Georgia in the bowl game. Georgia did what they wanted to with them. And then they just have not been able to recover since then. That is unfortunately how it goes in the transfer portal era. You live by it, you die by it. And they caught lightning in a bottle that one year. I think Mike Norvell should be focused more on, high school recruiting. That's a way to build your program in a more sustainable fashion. That transfer portal, it's great for putting a couple of broken bricks here and there, but you can't build a good foundation for a house that way. They did bring in Gus Malzahn. We talked about that earlier. Obviously, offensive coordinator. He's made a name for himself in what he's good at. But I don't know if that's going to address all the issues that they had on the defensive side of the ball. They didn't have a great transfer portal class to kind of shore up those problems that they had. So for us, Mike Norvell is on the third hottest seat in America. Number 2 is Brian Kelly at LSU. He has a great opportunity to rewrite everything that's been written about him so far this year. They have so much talent. Garrett Nussmeier is a Heisman favorite. He has weapons all around him. Defense. They had a top. They're in the top list of transfer portal class. So they actually did, address areas of issues that they had last year. My question to you, Aaron, where does he go from here if he doesn't have a successful season? And secondary question, what is considered a successful season for him? If I go back a couple years, they had Jaden Daniels who won the Heisman, but in my opinion, once he kind of realized that they weren't going to win the SEC, they weren't going to win the Natty, he just said, all right, forget it. Let's go ahead and make him, a Heisman winner. What's considered a successful season for Brian Kelly? And, if he doesn't make it happen this year, is it unrealistic to think that he doesn't get the boot, pun intended?
Sure. So, here's what I see as successful in my eyes and what I consider to be, it's an assumption, but the LSU standard, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think first things first, he's got to beat his rivals, right? He's got to find a way to beat Alabama this year. He's got to find a way to beat, Ole Miss and Florida, right?
Yeah.
Got to find a way to win those big games, right? The next thing is I think he has to make a run to be a playoff team this year. I think that would definitely offer him a
That's
lot more
that's the
job
very
security.
least I would say. That's the very least
Yeah,
he's got to do. Yeah.
very least, right? Um, I mean, he has theoretically everything he needs. He has, a very veteran quarterback in the SEC, one that's been successful, and Garrett Nussmeier. So I mean, the excuses are very, slim to none right now this
Yeah.
year. If he does get the boot, I think it would have to be a 7 win or less season for him to get the boot.
Hmm.
And where
They
does he
they
go
went.
from here?
Yeah. I was gonna
I
say they
think
went
it.
9-4. Can you do that again? Can they go 9-4 again? I
I
think
think
10
it.
or 11 is like the minimum for these guys.
Yeah, just because of the standard that's,
Yeah.
there at LSU. Yeah, 9-4. That's tough. That,
Yeah.
that's very tough. But where does he go if he doesn't have a successful season? Honestly, out of the SEC probably.
Yeah. For
He could
sure.
have end up at a Big 12 or an ACC school or a coordinator somewhere else. But
Yeah.
it's all speculation and assumptions right now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So that's numbers 3 and 2 on the hot seat. Who's number one?
Okay. Okay. So number one that we have on our list is Hugh Freeze at Auburn. Okay.
Okay.
So let's talk about, Hugh Freeze and the Auburn Tigers. First things first, he is an offensive guru. We've seen him have plenty of success all the way to a couple years back at Liberty. He's a really, really good recruiter. And this season, he has some really, really good home game leverage against his rivals. So he has Bama at home and he has UJ at home. So,
Nice.
you know, having those games at home could have a big impacts.
Yep.
Um, some of the weaknesses surrounding his season and his team this year, quarterback instability. I'm sure you've seen or heard about, Jackson Arnold and how he's easing the defense up to
Yeah.
give him confidence. That was,
Which
you, you
I feel
know,
like that does a kind of reverse psychology. If I know that the defense is being soft on me, that's kind of hurting my confidence, right?
exactly. And then at a very, basic level, it's not gonna make you better.
Yeah.
It's not iron sharpening iron and actually giving you full game speed and full competitive play, right? And so, there was, recently in one of the news articles that I read earlier, he was saying that there's potential that all three of his quarterbacks on the roster right now have the potential to play at Baylor in that game opener.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
to me, it helps nobody except maybe your younger players who don't have experience, but I don't think that's going to help Jackson Arnold's confidence either if he only
Yeah.
gets, half of a game of reps and then somebody else is getting in reps with the offense to try to grow chemistry,
Yeah.
So
Not against Baylor.
it's
That's a quality. I mean, that's a quality team. You do that against sorry, like someone else. I don't know, a Marshall
yeah,
or something. But yeah.
exactly. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that quarterback room turns out and who is going to be the guy that comes out and stands out. Um, Another thing that's a weakness on his I guess job security right now, his poor performance and in the SEC and his rivalry record. So
Hmm.
last year the Auburn Tigers they finished 5-7. They had really, really, really poor performance in one possession game. So 3 games last year, Cal, Oklahoma, and Missouri, they were lost by 7 points or less.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
that right there is the difference between a bowl game. Uh, it's the difference between him not even being in this conversation if you win those three
Right.
games. So
Yep.
he's gotta find a way to gain some strength and finish strong in those close games.
Yeah. One
Hmm.
thing about hot seat conversations that's always interesting to me is like there's obviously other guys that we left out. A couple honorable mentions. I think Billy Napier's kind of close to there. Lincoln Riley, he's got high expectations, but it's like at some point if they're all on the hot seat, how many of them are actually on it? Like if schools start firing one or two or three of them, do the other schools think like, oh well, if they're going to have new coaches, then we actually have a higher, degree of opportunity to actually like win next year. Maybe we'll keep our guy one more year. Like in a vacuum, yes, each school maybe wants to fire their guy, but like if other schools starts firing their coaches, do you fire yours? That's just a hypothetical question, just something that I think about. Any other thoughts on the hot seat stuff?
Sure. So yeah, opportunities, right? We talked about a lot of what could be wrong or is, has him in this predicament. He does have, transferred Jackson Arnold, even though it's a guy that he's trying to put confidence in a new program. He can really integrate, his offense around somebody who showed strong performance in the past, he has returning experienced receivers and offensive line, so there's definitely opportunity there to have a decent
Yep.
year.
Yep.
Lastly, the threats, right? So things that can, just continue to create this narrative. If you don't compete in your in conference game. So Georgia and Bama, again, they have both of these games at home. I think you have to try to at least get one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. For sure.
You know,
I don't think people
they,
are
they,
expecting to get both, but you got to get one.
you got to get one. They're cream of the crop. They're your rivals. A lot of people stand by the standard of I don't care what happens, we don't lose to our rival.
Right.
And so yeah, that's my take on Hugh Freeze and Auburn this year. It'll be interesting to see what happens, but giving your quarterback fake confidence,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sold on it yet.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Sounds good. We will wrap up this episode with one little news tidbit that we got today. So apparently the CFP is introducing a new metric. It's called record strength. Pretty much is what it sounds like. It's going to be one of the 12 or so metrics that they already were using to do their rankings for the CFP, but basically it's going to put more weight on teams that play quote unquote tougher schedules. The one thing that kind of stood out to me was is this really is I feel like this is going to only benefit certain leagues over others, certain leagues that call themselves tougher than other leagues. I still see that there's a lot of room for bias to work its way in terms of who makes the CFP and who doesn't. And I also just think with playoff expansion, does this even matter anymore? Like, are people worried about the strength of schedule between who makes it in first place versus who makes it into like 13th place? Because they're still in the playoffs, and we saw what Ohio State was able to do last year. They had a pretty low seed. They were able to run the table. No one was worried about what their strength of schedule was. Nobody was worried about what Oregon's strength of schedule was. They couldn't win a single game in the playoffs. So, Aaron, what do you think? I feel like this is a nothing burger. Little too late. Too little, too late. It would have been a lot more helpful when we had the 14 playoff. I think with this expanded playoff, it's not much of a big deal.
Yeah, I think, with the amount of teams that are getting into the playoffs now, you have a pretty good idea of who should be in and who shouldn't be in. After this season, whatever the committee decides to expand to, I feel like you're going to start to see a drop off from cream of the crop, top tier talent to somebody who just shouldn't be there. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
they're adding this they're adding this variable, but at the end of the day, I think teams should just be focused on if you win, you're in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So that is that. And to finish up our trivia from earlier, Aaron, the longest continuous series in FBS is Minnesota versus Wisconsin. It is the Paul
Wow.
Bunyan's Axe game, or at least that's the trophy. And they've played
Mhm.
that game every year since 1907. So
Mm.
maybe I'll make sure to put it on my schedule to start watching that game every year.
Yeah, that's interesting. Over 100 years. Wow.
Yeah. So so that's it for today's episode. Next episode, we will be back on Sunday. We will cover what we saw week 0. We will do some light week 1 preview stuff. We will talk about any news that broke, as week 0 kind of gets started. If there's any more further news about who's starting where, as fall camp kind of is finishing up and we're hearing more stuff, we'll cover that. But this has been First and Short. I am Mashfik.
I'm Aaron.
Yep, and we will see you on Sunday. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys.